That'll help us to sync the
Hi,
audio.
everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Mary Lee. Today we have a special guest star with us. This is Liam Clark, seminary student, apologist, youth leader at his church, and also an old earth creationist. And today he's going to be answering some questions for us. And if you have any questions that you'd like answered, please drop them down in the comments and we'll get those answered for you. Hi, Liam.
Hi.
Thanks for letting me come and hang out with you today.
Anytime.
It's a pleasure talking to you. So, so those of us who are not so much in the know about old earth creationism, can you kind of explain a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of different streams of old earth creationism, but essentially it's the one thing that they all have in common is that they don't take a literalistic 24-hour kind of day cycle for the days of creation. So there's a couple different ways that looks. Like some people have the gap theory where they think there's a long period of time in between Genesis 1 and 2. There's some people that have more of a day age theory where they think each day is actually a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So old earth creationism isn't one viewpoint. It's kind of basically every viewpoint that doesn't think it's a strict literal 24-hour kind of solar cycle, 24-hour period.
Okay, so there's different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what do you find are the most biblically compelling arguments for old earth creationism?
Yeah, I think it's just reading through Genesis and riddling the text with questions, trying to say something to the degree of like, if I weren't a young earth creationist, how would I use this, or how would I answer this? And so, for example, like when you start reading about the days of creation and how they're supposed to be 24-hour cycles, and we know we get our 24-hour day cycle from the sun and the moon, right. And yet the sun and the moon weren't even created until day 4. Mm-hmm. And so it's just things like that make you stop and question, like, well, maybe there's something else going on here. So it's not the assertion that the Bible teaches the earth is old. It's more so the assertion that it's not teaching that it's young. It's more so the assertion that it's silent on it, that the Bible doesn't tell us how old the earth is one way or the other, and that the 6 days of creation are not trying to communicate a materialistic, scientific, comprehensive understanding of how God did it, as much as it is that he's trying to communicate something deeper, something richer, mm-hmm. something more theologically important than mm-hmm. materialistically important.
Right. So if you're reading it strictly as a science
book, right,
you're kind of missing the point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially when you realize that that the people receiving it at the time weren't interested in the kind of questions that we're interested in today. Mm-hmm. Their ontology looked a lot different. They were interested more in functionality than materialistic, like composition, like we are today. We're very post-enlightenment. We're very much interested in scientific, naturalistic explanations of right. things. Mm-hmm. And that's how we know things to exist ontologically, is by the things that they're composed of. So I know a chair is a chair because it's, made of wood and it has 4 legs and it has all these things. Whereas into the ancient Near East that the book of Genesis wouldn't have been written to, they understood things to exist more as the function that they serve. I know it's a chair because I sit in it. Right. You know what I mean? Versus I know it's a chair because of how it's composed. I know it's mm-hmm. a chair because of the function that it serves. Mm-hmm. And so they would have understood Genesis a lot more similar to that understanding is God assigning functionality and order to things. That's kind of the view that that John Walton in his book, The Lost World of Genesis 1 and The Lost World of Adam and Eve, he kind of argues for a more functionality understanding of Genesis than just a strict materialistic. Mm-hmm. He talks about the house versus the home. Mm. And so when someone is showing you around their house and, they've got a big, beautiful window that overlooks a lake and, a pool room and a rec room and, or all these different things, right. and you're touring them around and someone asks like, hey, like, so tell me about your house. They're not interested in hearing about what kind of 2x4s you used and, right. and the kind of shingles that you used for the house. They're interested more in why you put a gigantic sofa there, or why, or what purpose that you decided to build a window overlooking here. They want to know, more of the functionality of the home, why the home is the way that it is, instead of just the materialistic composition that the frame of the house was used, and all those kind of things.
Right. So you're saying that the text doesn't require that we believe young Earth necessarily.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, that's the whole argument, is basically just that the Bible is silent on exactly how long, that it doesn't comment one way or the other.
But it seems like the science backs up old Earth. So how do you explain that, though, actually, that people will say that you're taking secular scientific views and trying to incorporate them into the Bible, and they're not compatible?
Yeah, it's just not true. I mean, there's been lots of really honest, theologically conservative, Bible-believing believers that have held to a view that was not incompatible with, modern science. And so it's like to go down that road is a slippery slope, because then you have to say, like, if anybody who doesn't hold to this strict literalistic 24-hour day is, being very theologically liberal, or it's a theologically liberal view to have, then you have just put Charles Spurgeon in the camp of theologically liberal.
Right.
You have just put C.S. Lewis in the camp of theologically liberal. You have just put Dr. J. Vernon McGee in the camp of theologically liberal,
right.
Where it's like, clearly that's not the case. If anybody was theologically conservative, it was Charles Spurgeon.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it kind of just seems very arrogant to say, like, anyone that doesn't hold to this strict literal 24-hour, 6 days of creation doesn't care about the authority of Scripture as much as people that do.
Right.
Because then look at what you're saying. You're saying, I care more about the authority of Scripture than Charles Spurgeon, or C.S. Lewis, or J. Vernon McGee, or any number of Christians that have held this viewpoint. And even like Augustine, he wasn't an old earth creationist in the sense that, we want him to, but he also wasn't a young earth creationist in the modern sense. He had a very framework view of Genesis. And even in his what's called Augustine's literal interpretation of Genesis, it's not literal in the way that we understand it today. Right. His understanding of Genesis was very much, it was a framework. It was like he's trying to communicate something deeper, and the 6 days are functioning more as a framework for communicating theological truths than actual just like materialistic understandings. Yeah. So
what is the historical understanding of old Earth? It's you just mentioned that they didn't have the science that we have now. So they wouldn't have been shocked by an old Earth, would they? Do you think?
I think, and that's a great question. That's one that Dr. Gavin Ortlund talks about. Is he asked the question, like, would Augustine have been an old Earth creationist, right? Because even though, like, he didn't think the Earth was 4.5 billion years old, but no one before radiometric dating did. So of course they didn't. Like, we wouldn't expect them to.
Right.
The question becomes more, did they have a view of Genesis 1 that allowed for the understanding of science to comment on it? And I think
to change or progress.
Yeah. I think the history of it is a long and complicated one, and even Augustine in his works he writes about Genesis 1 quite a lot, and he says that, talking about Moses, if I could I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, if I could have Moses in front of me, I would grab him by the shoulders and demand that he tell me what in the beginning means, because like he spent his whole life trying to understand it, and it was just like the longer, and that's one of those things, is that the longer you look at it, the less confident that you become in this kind of just very simple modernistic understanding. Day is 24 hours, this is how God did it. The longer you look at it, it does start to kind of be like, man, the more I look at this, the more questions I have, and it stops becoming quite so, I could stop becoming quite so confident. And so there was some people throughout church history that actually thought each day was 1,000 years, because elsewhere in Scripture it says, to the Lord every day is as 1,000 years. Right. And so there was actually some people that thought each day of creation was 1,000 years. So still not old Earth in the sense that some people would be today, but not young Earth in the sense that each day is literally 24 hours. There's also some people that think that the each 24 or the days of creation are metaphorical and symbolic because God actually did it all instantaneously. That God didn't even need 6 days to create.
Right.
He actually just did it all instantaneously. Right? And so again, definitely young earth in that sense, but not young earth in the sense that it was a literal understanding of day. Yeah.
So you were raised young earth in a context where young earth creationism is almost a test of orthodoxy.
Yeah.
So what changed your mind?
Yeah, it was just reading the scriptures, and it was riddling the text with questions, trying to understand how we can, if we get our 24-hour day cycle from the sun and the moon, how is it possible that the sun and the moon weren't even created until day 4? Right there, that gives you a hint that maybe day here is trying to say something a little bit different. Right. But also things like, if we have to take a literal interpretation of the whole text, how come we don't take, Adam and Eve were one flesh as literal? We don't think that they literally became one, like, Siamese twin or something like that. Right. Like, there's lots of different passages like that kind of, again, it's not like a slam dunk in the old earth creationist camp, but it's the old earth creationist assertion is much more modest than the young earth one. And it's basically just like, it's not a literal 24-hour days. And so the young earth creationist has a much harder job because they are positively asserting something, and they have to show why it can't be anything but that. And the old earth creationists, all they have to do is basically say, like, if I can come up with even one potential that, like, explanation that isn't a literalistic one, then I've just shown that it doesn't have to be yours.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So the young earth creationist has to prove why a bunch of different possible explanations are wrong, and everybody else only has to explain why only one is wrong.
Right. Well, can you explain your understanding of the days of creation? Because I heard something recently and I thought it was kind of interesting. And I had actually thought about this before. There are a number of things that have kind of puzzled me and scratched my head for most of my life. And one of them was that on day 6, Adam would have had a really, really busy day that day.
Yeah.
If he had everything that had happened in a 24-hour cycle. He named all the animals on that day. He discovered he was lonely, and then God created a wife for him, all on one day, all in one 24-hour period. And I always thought that was kind of a little bit funny. And there was a couple of other things too that I might ask you about in a little bit too, but so explain your understanding of what the days are.
Yeah, I tend to go with more of John Walton's view, and that is it's more of a explaining things in terms of functionality and the purpose that they serve. So in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. Right? So it's like already that tells you right there, the actors are already on the stage. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. So it's like, wait, when he created it, it was already there? Like,
right.
What do you mean?
Right.
And same thing with before he creates water. There's water. The earth,
the earth, spirit was hovering over the deep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like before there's water. So it's like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. And again, that's just one of those things that you go, it's just questions. It's just things that make you in a very strict literalistic understanding, make you go, what do we do with that? You know what I mean? If you're really looking at it closely, you have to kind of be like, how is there water before God invented water? You know what I mean? Yeah. And if you're willing to say like, well, maybe this is saying something deeper, then it frees you up. So my understanding is it's God stepping into a chaotic universe and assigning function and order to it. Now that's not to say, and we want to be really careful about this, that the universe was already existing and God just kind of like, he's some kind of contingent being like Zeus who kind of like tweaks it. Yeah. No, you still have to hold to one of the most essential doctrines is the doctrine of ex nihilo, right? That God created everything ex nihilo. That means he didn't need anything. God is not contingent upon anything else. But it's expressing it differently. It's communicating something that like like that word formless and void, tohu and bohu, it literally means it's like welter and waste. It's chaos. That same language is used elsewhere. I think it's in Jeremiah. I might be wrong on that, but I think it's in Jeremiah. It talks about it's going to be tohu and bohu. It's going to be formless and void. And he's talking about the city of Jerusalem. Like it's going to be chaos.
Wasting,
It's going to be wasteland, right? And so that's God stepping into it and assigning functionality. And the significance of that comes from the context of the time and the place in which it was written to. Israel just left Egypt, which is, immensely pagan. And all of these pagan deities are contingent beings. And so they don't create things in and of themselves. They are things. We worship the sun. We worship the frog. We worship all these different contingent beings. Right. Whereas, like, hey, you worship the trees. You worship the sun. Here comes Genesis 1, which is like revolutionary, saying, God invented the sun. Right. God invented the animals. God invented the frog. God invented nature.
Right.
Like, so it's almost a commentary statement on like all of these pagan nations that were surrounding Israel, to be like, hey, Israel's going to be different. Like monotheism.
Right.
Like God is not a contingent being. God is outside of all of these things that you worship. And guess what? He is actually over all of these things. My God is bigger than the sun. My God, like, oh, you worship the sun? Yeah, that's the thing that my God just put there. Yeah. My God put that there. Yeah. Like, it's a stark contrast. Yeah. So that's kind of my understanding, is God is declaring definitively his rule and his sovereignty over everything, and how nothing functions apart from his assigning it function. Right. Nothing happens outside of his realm of purview, and everything works exactly the way that God wanted it to work. Right. And it was good. It functions good. And that's what, like, their understanding of good is much different from ours, in that we think something is good as if it's like of high excellence or moral perfection, where, again, going back to functionality, they would have understand things to be good in terms of the function that it served. A vacuum is a good vacuum, the better it works at sucking things, right? Like a saw is a good saw, determined by how well it saws things, right? And so when God looks at the world and says it's good, it's not that it's necessarily morally perfect in every single way, but that it's functioning exactly the way that God ordered it. It's good. And so he didn't mess up. You know what I mean?
Exactly.